that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and the famous Tom Fennell sitting
Ho ho!
Hello, hello. And every day I get up early and look at the news. Today I was up 3:30 today.
2:30.
3:30.
3:30. That's late, isn't it?
No, it's actually a little bit early for me, but it meant that I could actually start work before 4.
Okay.
And I finished work at about 8:35, something like that.
I don't even know who I am by then.
Yeah. Well, I'd already had 2 pots of coffee. And what I do is I look through the news looking for anything that I can find about energy and climate change. Been a lot recently. And I put it on a blog, geoharvey.com. And I put the blog postings up every day,
Yeah.
every day they go up. And usually 10 or 15 articles that I have found are listed there. We have a monitor on the blink here in the studio.
Yeah, it's flashing at us.
Yes, well, we'll ignore it. So each article is represented by a synopsis of about 50 to 55 words and a link to the original article. So if we talk about something,
because of the link.
Yeah. Tom and I talk about 20 of these things about every week.
The best of the blog.
The best of the blog. We do this on Thursday mornings. And today being the 14th, we're starting a week ago on Thursday, September 7th. And we will try to keep you apprised of the dates of the articles that we're reading about so that you can go to the blog, geoharvey.com, and click on the appropriate date at the calendar, or you can scroll down possibly. But click on the date and it'll take you to the posting for that date, and you can find the article and read it in depth.
Some of these articles are well worth searching out and reading.
Some of them are fun. Some of them are scary. But
all of the above.
All of the above. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, should we start doing our business of the day?
I think we should.
Okay, we've got a picture here.
Up here.
This picture is of an Indonesian power plant, and the article comes from Echo Business. That is echo-business.com, and this is again September 7th.
Yeah, okay, let's see, get it going here.
You got a title for that.
The financial case against coal power in Indonesia.
A recent report by the Institute of Energy Economics and Financial Analysis warns that Indonesia's coal-based electricity strategy risks wasting $76 billion over the next 25 years.
That ain't hay.
No, especially for a country like Indonesia, where they've got a lot of people who don't have a lot of money. New generating technology and changing energy markets are making it easier and cheaper to supply electricity with small distributed power stations, which means that those people can get their electricity.
Get some juice, yeah,
absolutely, for change.
It's interesting here, a little backstory, because Indonesia is an island nation, as you probably know.
Yes.
There's over 17,000 islands. A lot of islands.
Yeah.
And because of this idea of islands, it kind of defies the idea of a national transmission grid.
Yes.
However, the country relies on big centralized coal plants for its power.
Yeah.
Duh!
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
So what we're doing here is we're trying to decentralize. Indonesia is trying to decentralize generation.
Actually, some of us. Tomas Fricka, who was on our show a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he's got something going in Indonesia.
He lives in Bali and in Brattleboro. So yeah, we've got connections there.
And of course, the article doesn't say much about it, but it's very logical at this point in time that much of that decentralized power would be renewable.
Right. Decentralized.
They're not going to have tiny coal plants.
Or, the thing that in the past has been very common on islands is to have diesel generators, and they're very expensive. This is also true in places like Alaska, where...
Well, Indonesia has oil.
Yeah.
So it might just be that diesel fuel's cheap.
Well, diesel fuel probably is cheap, but that doesn't mean it's cheap to run diesel generators compared
that's true, too.
compared to solar power or whatever. So our next item is from Hellenic Shipping News Worldwide, which we get a surprising number of articles from.
France plans to end oil and gas production by 2040. This is significant.
It is indeed. France plans to pass legislation by the end of this year to phase out all oil and gas exploration and production on its mainland and overseas territories.
Say that last word over again.
Territories?
And overseas territories.
And overseas territories.
They don't have any oil in France, but they got a lot like in South America and stuff like that.
Right.
Where the French are exploiting the oil, but they're going to stop.
You don't think about France as having territories in North America, South America, and the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, but they do.
But they do.
Right off Maine, there's 2 islands that belong to France.
That's right. And, they're part of France, technically. They're going to phase out all exploration by 2040, according to a draft bill. It will no longer issue exploration permits, and the extension of current concessions will gradually be limited until they phase out everything by 2040.
That's very interesting. France is going to be the first country to do so, by the way.
Yes.
Okay. And President Macron, I could say Macron.
Wow, you do that so well.
Wants to make France carbon neutral by 2050. Well, he's on the way. And he plans to curb greenhouse gas emissions by leaving fossil fuels in the ground.
Absolutely.
And by the way, 2040 is the same year that France plans to end the sale of gasoline and diesel vehicles.
Right.
And we'll hear a little bit more about that in another country.
We will indeed. Our next item is from the MIT Technology Review.
Well, this was a little bit more current and a little bit more scary.
Yes.
Our hurricane risk models are dangerously out of date.
More than half of the deluge associated with Tropical Storm Harvey happened, quote, outside of any mapped flood zone, end quote, even including 500-year events in areas with only, quote, minimal flood hazard, end quote. The Houston area suffered from something more than just random bad luck.
Well, the article talks about we've built our cities in flood protections with assumptions based on the climate of the past.
Yeah.
And the climate's changing.
And you've got cities like Miami, where the engineers built the roads based on the height of the highest high tide of the month.
At that time.
At that time, not considering that climate change was going to make the oceans higher. And climate change has made the oceans higher. Now, how the Chinese managed to hoax this into existence, I don't know. But the oceans are higher. You know, and I mentioned
getting wealthy.
Yeah, and I mentioned that to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Are you sure the land isn't going lower?" Well, if it is, in some places, it is going lower, but it's not going lower everywhere on Earth. And
only where the floods are happening.
Yeah, right. Only where the floods are happening.
It's happening in Louisiana too.
Yes, and we are up to September 8th.
Well, there's a little bit, one quick takeaway from here.
Okay.
In 2015, President Obama issued an executive order that established new flood standards for federally funded projects that took into account the rising risks of climate change.
Aha.
Less than 2 weeks before Harvey made landfall, President Trump rescinded that order.
Rescinded the order, of course. You don't need to have that order. The hurricane's already here. You can't change anything
we'll be
in 2
talking
weeks.
about that a little bit later in a slightly different context.
Now we are up to September 8th, and we have a picture of Prince's Street. This is not Princess Street, it is Princess Street. More than one prince, multiple princes.
Now, is this the main drag in Edinburgh? Or
It's
what?
one of a couple of them. The other one is the one called the Royal Mile, or another one is called the Royal Mile. It's funny because I saw this picture and I didn't see a caption on it. And I said, that looks like Princess Street in Edinburgh. And why I recognized that, I was there 45 years ago. 45? I'm sorry, I made a mistake 55 years ago. It
probably doesn't look like it's changed much in 50 years.
It probably hasn't. But it's got a beautiful garden, which you can see in the upper left there. And, you know, I spent all of about one day walking up and down that street. And why I would remember it, I don't know. Anyway, we are up to September 8th, and this thing came from Clean Technica.
Scotland planning to phase out diesel and petrol gas car sales by 2032. Did I just reference something
I
like
think
that?
you did.
So Scotland's going to beat France, but...
Yeah, it's going to beat France, and it's also going to beat the UK. The government of Scotland is now planning to phase out the sale of new petrol, gasoline, and diesel cars by the year 2032, a full 8 years earlier than current plans of the UK government. The plan was revealed by Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Scotland currently accounts for roughly 10% of the UK's total auto market. And you know, I have to say, I wonder how this is all going to end, because at some point, the gas stations are going to be closing because nobody's going to be buying gas. And then for those few people...
We'll be talking about that a little bit later on, too.
When those people when the people who still have gas cars are trying to fuel them, they're going to have more and more trouble. Oh well.
Yeah, I hear you.
So what do you got on this? Any more, Tom, or should we go on?
Well, they're talking about, this is Scotland. Britain hasn't done much yet, but they're saying London needs it bad.
Yeah, London has bad air, and
Very bad air.
And a pretty progressive mayor. Okay, our next item is also from Clean Technica.
Alrighty. Solar roof tile production at Tesla's Buffalo Gigafactory is now up and running. That's good news.
It is. Solar roof tile production at Tesla's Gigafactory 2 production plant in Buffalo, New York, has now begun as of the end of August, according to the company's chief technology officer. Up to this point, for development reasons, Tesla's new solar roof tiles had only been produced on a small scale in a plant in Fremont, California.
They got big plans for this plant. It's
They
only
do.
just getting started.
Yeah.
They're in partnership with Panasonic
Mm-hmm.
in this plant.
Yes.
Panasonic is going to make the cells, and then Tesla's going to assemble the cells into rooftop solar and stuff like that. And eventually, the rooftop tiles will be made in Buffalo as well, along with traditional solar panels. So they're planning to be big in this field.
And those solar panels that they're making are actually part of the roof.
That's the roof tiles.
That's the roof tiles,
Yep.
and they can look, for example, like
Like a
slate.
roof.
They can look like slate.
Yeah.
They've got slate ones.
Yep, yep.
And when you put those in, they should outlast slate.
I think
They're
are designed to.
Yeah, they're made of glass.
Okay.
But you know, slate breaks fairly easily, and sometimes some glasses don't break all that easily.
Well, I'm sure that they are not using the kind of glass that'll break if a baseball hits it.
No, I don't think so. And you know, I talked to a fellow who worked for Green Mountain Power, and he was up in Rutland, and he said that, you know, they've got that 2 megawatt solar array in Rutland. He said kids throw rocks at it. Kids walking down the street will throw rocks at it.
And nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Yeah.
The rocks just bounce off. It's pretty tough glass. It's not...
Well, they would have to be.
Yes, indeed.
They would have to be. I mean,
Indeed.
yeah.
It would have to be. Okay, so we've got an item coming up now from North American Wind Power.
Denver releases study on 100% renewables. This is also significant.
A study from Denver's Department of Environmental Health shows that moving to 100% clean energy by 2030 or earlier is an achievable strategy that Denver can pursue to meet 80% by 2050 carbon reduction goal. The report comes just weeks after the mayor issued a vision for powering all of Denver with renewable energy. This is a little bit confusing because they're saying 100% clean energy by 2030. What they really mean is 100% clean electricity by 2030. And that 80% by 2050 includes not only electricity, but transportation and heat and industry and so forth.
They're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, they are.
I didn't notice, but it came out of the article. Denver has traditionally suffered some of the worst air quality in the nation. You don't think about that.
No, I used to live in Denver. We had tumbleweeds rolling across our lawn.
Yeah, that's cool.
That was a long time ago. When I lived in Denver, Tom,
Yeah.
you could go. We would go into the middle of town, and I would see Native Americans standing on street corners wearing top hats with feathers in them, and I am not kidding. But that was, 66 years ago, so...
But top hats with feathers was a thing among the natives then, yeah.
It was.
I've seen many pictures of that, yeah.
And I don't know what they were doing, but, they may have been on their way to work or whatnot, stopping and chatting with their friends, but they were there. Okay, we're up to Saturday, September 9th, and we have an item from Broadway World.
Renewable energy comes to the largest living history museum in the Northeast.
Yeah.
And there's an image here.
There's an image of a mill at Old Sturbridge Village, a living history museum depicting rural New England town from the 1830s. Is now powered by a 1.8 megawatt solar ground mount owned and operated by Green Street's Power Partners, LLC. The solar system will provide power at a discounted rate for 25 years to Old Sturbridge Village, which welcomes more than 250,000 visitors annually. And, I can hardly help but smile looking at, for one thing, that water wheel, which I presume is still in use, or is in use.
At least for demonstration.
At least for demonstration.
I don't think they're grinding flour anymore. But
they might not be grinding flour, but that mill might be doing something other than...
It probably is grinding wheat for flour, but
or
just for demonstration.
It could be a lumber mill.
I don't think so. But it could be. But I don't...
Yeah.
In the old village, they needed wheat flour more than they needed lumber.
Well, when I was, I used to have a magazine that dealt with all kinds of weird things, and we had an article on a mill that was in operation in the New York metropolitan. It wasn't in New York City, but it was about 35 miles away, in an area where people would commute, and that mill was making pet food, grinding
up animals.
No, it was grinding up grain, but it was grinding up into not flour, but just milled
animal food
stuff that animals could eat, and it was powered by a water wheel at that time.
Well, this Living History Museum of Old Sturbridge Village is very worthwhile visiting.
Yeah.
It's a fun place.
I remember seeing it when I was a kid.
Yeah, my sister took her family there like every year.
Really? Another one that I loved was the Deerfield. Old Deerfield.
Old Sturbridge Village is more intense, though. It really is.
It is, because they're actually doing a lot of stuff there.
I mean, Deerfield's nice. I visited it many times when I was tour guiding at Mount Snow.
But
Sturbridge Village was that's the real deal.
I visited it as a kid, and then I visited it with my own kids, and was a little bit surprised to discover that the displays that we were seeing had not changed in all that time. Okay, so our next item is from vtdigger.org. This is close to home.
Developer wants 3 solar arrays bigger than any yet in Vermont.
New documents show that Connecticut-based Freepoint Solar has plans to develop 3 arrays, each capable of generating 20 megawatts of power. They would be in Vernon, Shaftesbury, and Fairhaven, Vermont. Only one array of that size has been approved in Vermont at this point. It hasn't been built yet. Large photovoltaic projects have spurred debates about siting and transmission capacity.
Well, if you're wondering where they're going to be in Vernon, the exact locations have not yet been revealed. But the company says the sites will have minimal visibility to the public. I would expect they're going to be somewhere near where Yankee was.
Well, it would make sense that they'd be as
close.
Yeah, that's where the power lines are.
By the way, this is 20 megawatts that they're talking about. The one going up in the landfill here is 5 megawatts.
Right.
So this is 4 times its size.
Right.
And there's several others going on in the state by other developers that are in that same range. So this is the coming thing. That
one that was already approved for 20 megawatts is one of, I think it's 8 by the same developer, all the same size.
That's Ranger Solar.
Yeah. And you know, it's a funny thing. People complain about utility scale solar and how awful it is and the importance of keeping agricultural land productive as agricultural land.
Well, it's good if you can make a living doing it.
Well, the thing is, solar farms in many parts of the world are used for agriculture.
Oh, yeah.
And in the UK, they typically have sheep grazing under them, which has got the double benefit of being a place where sheep can graze and also keeping the vegetation down around the arrays themselves. And one of the things that's interesting is that there are strains of grass that are traditionally used for raising sheep, and it turns out that they will grow just as well under solar panels with partial shade.
They don't need really bright sunshine.
They don't need a lot of sunshine. So this is that's a win-win. There are other things like we talked about mushrooms last week.
Yeah, that's right.
But compare that with conventional raised corn, and you're talking about, would you rather live across the street from a solar farm that has sheep under it, or would you rather live across the street from a conventional cornfield?
Well, a conventional cornfield isn't exactly a thing of beauty.
Not only is it not a thing of beauty, but they fertilize it with
Bad stuff.
And they dump herbicides on it, and they dump insecticides on it, and they dump fungicides on it.
A lot of second-order consequences people don't even
Absolutely,
think about.
absolutely. Would you rather live across a place where toxic materials are sprayed all over the ground, more or less constantly, where you have a view of mud 8 months out of the year? Oh well.
You mentioned sheep. Cattle grow well under solar too.
I think you'd have to mount the panels a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I always worry about the things that cows lean against. You know, when I was a kid, we had cows around. They weren't our cows, but they would lean against the fence near our house and push it over, and then they'd wind up looking through the kitchen window. They like music. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, we got another one here. This is a very timely one here.
Yeah, an article from the New York Times.
How Hurricane Irma became so huge and destructive.
As Hurricane Irma barrels dangerously across Florida, of course this was written at the time that it was doing it, scientists say that the perfect mix of meteorological conditions has conspired over the past week to make a storm that is unusually large and powerful. In a season expected to have powerful hurricanes, Irma stands out. Irma was the most powerful hurricane ever to form in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes. Now the wind scale goes from 1 to 5.
Yes.
They were estimating this storm at 7.
Well, there's a reason why it stops at 5, and that is that the guy who created it said anything above that...
Nothing's going to be that bad. Right?
No, he didn't say that. He said if it's worse than that, it's not going to do anything more damage, because at 5 everything gets destroyed. So
okay.
That's what his thinking was. But it's also the first time we've had 2 Category 4 hurricanes hit the United States in the same year. These two were 2 weeks apart, and the season's just half over.
Yeah.
So
there's more coming, guys.
There may be.
Could very well be.
That's right.
Well, this was from the article. You need just the right ingredients for a hurricane of this magnitude to last for so long.
Yes.
And Irma had them all.
Yes.
Warmer than average ocean surface temperatures, weaker than average wind shear, and a ridge of high pressure kept the storm from wandering off harmlessly into the cooler northern ocean.
There you go.
Bingo.
Which is Jose, which is the next hurricane after.
That's what happened, Jose.
Yeah, it's wandering off to the northeast. After doing a loop-the-loop and looking like it might go straight at Florida. Okay, we're up to Sunday, September 10th.
We haven't seen yet the results of the damage in Florida.
No, we have not seen it.
So, I mean, they're just counting it up.
Well, just from Hurricane Harvey, we've had more damage than we have had in any previous year.
It hit Houston bad.
Yeah,
and Houston was totally unprepared.
But that was if we had just Hurricane Harvey, it would have made this year the worst, most destructive year for hurricane damage. And now we've got Irma going up the west coast of Florida. So I don't know what's going to come out of that. I know that there have been a lot of things saying that the responders to that did a really good job to the people responding to Irma, but I haven't seen anything on the actual estimated damage.
The only thing I saw was that responders are pouring down there
Yes.
from all over the country,
Yes.
including Vermont.
Including Vermont, including Montana, for crying out
Yeah.
loud. You know, people who are.
And this is what they do in that field.
Yeah.
Utility guys.
Yeah.
You know, hurricane.
That's
pack
right.
my bags.
I would be surprised if they didn't have a bunch of people down there from Canada.
Oh, I wouldn't either. Not at all.
I'd be surprised if there weren't.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
you know, that's what good Canadians do. Okay, we are up to September 10th, Sunday.
This is an interesting article, very interesting article.
Yeah,
New state science standards which include climate change are approved. Now, this is in Nebraska,
it's in Nebraska.
which says a lot.
Yeah, and this is in the Omaha World Herald. And you know, we could spend an hour just talking about this one article, even though it's not hugely long. It's got some really interesting implications.
Absolutely.
The Nebraska State Board of Education approved a new science standards that challenge kids to think and act like scientists.
Can't do that.
Terrible. Under the new standards, students will, quote, analyze geoscience data and the results from global climate models to make an evidence-based forecast of the current rate and scale of global or regional climate changes, end quote. Now,
there's a quick takeaway from this article. The adoption of these standards marks the start of a very exciting and critical journey in science.
yes, these kids are being challenged to think for themselves.
You can't do that.
Oh my gosh.
What are you going to say about it when I so rudely interrupted you?
That's what I was going to say. The kids are being challenged to think for themselves, and you know, they're being told this is how scientists think. What do you think about the problems that we have? What do you think about the problems that we're experiencing? What do you think about your own future, kids?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a bunch of radical, Kansas thinkers out there, people who are completely opposed to the goals of the Koch brothers.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Somebody asked me, why did the Koch brothers do what they do? And I answered with just one word: greed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably as good a
What does a billionaire want more than anything else?
another billion.
Another billion. There you go.
Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on. We got a picture coming
We
up
have
here.
a picture here of Tampa in 2003, and this is an article from Think Progress. In this particular case, the picture wasn't with the article. Usually, I put up pictures that are found with the article, but in this case, I went to Wikimedia Commons because I wanted to see what Tampa looked like.
Well, my folks used to live in St. Pete, which is just right across the bay from Tampa. They didn't have buildings like this then.
Yeah, well,
So this is the new Tampa,
this is the new Tampa.
if they're still there.
Okay, what do you got for
Irma takes aim at America's most vulnerable and unprepared city.
Hurricane Irma appears to have Tampa in its crosshairs, potentially hitting the city as a Category 3 storm on Monday morning. That was last Monday. Unfortunately, Tampa is unprepared. Climate science denial has thwarted efforts to plan for rising seas and worsening storms. Now,
This was written before this hurricane
This is
hit
before it
there.
hit, and I think it was a Category 2 when it hit.
Was
I
it?
might be mistaken. But, well, you know, the hurricane went a little bit farther east than they thought just before it was going to go up the
Yeah,
coast.
yep.
And the question was, is the eye going to be over land or is it going to be over water? Because if it stayed over water, it would have retained its strength. But if going over land, it lost its strength. And as it got to Tampa, it had already lost more strength than it might have gone down to a Category 1, but I think it was a Category 2. Anyway, I've been looking at the news to try to see what kind of damage had happened to Tampa, and I haven't been able to find anything that you could put into numbers.
I saw an aerial picture of St. Pete,
Yeah,
It looked like it was all in the water.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I saw pictures of, I think it might have been a manatee that got beached because the waters had receded at low tide, and the poor animal was just stuck there. And it was in an article about the care that was being given to animals in Florida, and it was pets and wild animals. And I think, as I said, I think it was a manatee. It looked like a manatee.
Ain't too many things look like manatees.
Yeah, but they said that people had taken care of it as well as they could, and then they had stories about sharks that had been moved from one place to another to save them. A couple of sharks had been taken to Atlanta, and
Sharks take it to Atlanta?
yeah, sharks. They were zoo sharks.
Zoo sharks, okay.
They took them to Atlanta, and they had pet-friendly shelters in Florida.
All right.
So that if you have dogs and
You can
cats
bring
and
them.
things, you could bring them there.
Yep.
You could hear them all just going.
Pets are people too.
Yeah, they are. They're what are called fur people.
Fur people.
Yes.
Yeah.
A pet is a fur person. Okay.
Well, the Washington Post had a comment on this.
Yeah.
The reason the city is so unprepared is the pervasive climate science denial among state leaders, like the governor.
Yeah.
Hillsborough County and Tampa are super conservative.
Yeah.
They're burying their heads in the sand.
Yeah, and they're going to have to stop doing that. And I noticed that John McCain is the first senator, Republican senator, to say we've got to do something about climate change. Now, maybe they're
He's
going
always
to...
been a maverick.
He's always been a maverick. Yeah, that's true. And I kind of suspect that he might not run for Senate again, so he's not terrible.
I think he's pretty sick.
Well, I don't know how he's
brain
doing.
cancer, so
yeah, he had it. I don't know. I know that he's got some stitches over his eye. I don't know exactly.
Well, we don't know, but I think from what I've read between the lines,
He may be in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was from Think Progress, and we've got an item coming up
We
now
referenced this up above.
from Clean Technica.
Electric cars coming quickly will disrupt a bunch of industries.
Disrupt. Oh my gosh. J.P. Morgan Casanova, that is Cazenove, and I maybe pronounce it wrong, but there it is, has joined the ranks of those who believe the electric vehicle revolution will happen sooner rather than later. J.P. Morgan noted that the price differential between legacy vehicles and EVs is gradually narrowing as battery prices fall, but that once a certain tipping point is reached, things could start happening quickly.
By the way, this Casanova is a stockbroker company
Okay.
that J.P. Morgan bought.
Okay.
Okay, and now they're handling stocks for J.P. Morgan.
Yeah. This is, we've seen really kind of interesting preparatory work in this. Tesla's new batteries being just part of it, but they had a study recently that I think we reported a couple of weeks ago about electric vehicles in Germany or the Netherlands or one of those countries, Denmark possibly, where they had 100 vehicles and the people who had them were allowing the utilities to discharge them.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And they earned $1,750.
Virtual
Yeah, they earned $1,750 on average in the course of a year, which meant that they were covering the cost of fueling their cars.
Yep.
So
Green Mountain Power is doing something very similar.
Green Mountain Power could very easily do that, and when that happens, it means that the owners of these cars, which are the prices on them are getting to be about equal to the prices on gasoline
Regular cars do, yep.
It's gonna be possible to drive them almost for free. They
Absolutely.
require very little maintenance. I mean, I talked.
Well, I was just going to mention that.
Yeah.
EVs have 20 moving parts compared to as many as 2,000 in an internal combustion engine.
Yeah. Okay.
Much lower maintenance costs.
Yes.
And
much lower.
we're not even talking about that.
Well, the big maintenance cost is tires.
Yeah. No oil changes, no spark plugs. You know?
No
No
mufflers,
timing.
no mufflers,
No mufflers.
needing to be replaced.
Keep going.
Going
We don't
down
have
this
enough
list.
time left in the show to mention them all.
Yes, I think that's probably true. Okay, we are up to Monday, September 11th, and we have an item from the Recorder, which is, of course, the paper in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah, it is, but it's not about Greenfield,
It
Massachusetts.
sure is not.
Restoring electricity after Irma will be slow. I got a picture coming up here.
Yes, you do, as a matter of fact. There it is. And this picture, I'd like to comment on the picture. That is said to be a photograph by a guy named Jim Rossall in South Florida, and maybe it is, but I kind of suspect that it's a painting of a sinking ship that was done by Turner. Okay, I take it back.
Yeah.
Jim Rossall probably got soaking wet doing that.
Taking that picture.
Anyway, as Hurricane Irma swept through South Florida, power utility officials warned Sunday that restoring electricity to more than 2 million homes and businesses would be a slow, dangerous, and time-consuming process. A Florida Power and Light spokesman said he expects full power restoration after the storm to take multi-weeks.
Well, that's what the headline says. Restoring electricity after Irma will be slow. And it will be slow.
It will be slow, and people down there are in trouble because not only don't they have things like refrigeration and stuff like that we would have in Vermont, but they're in trouble because it's hot down there. And you know, I've already read about.
It's still summer.
Yeah, I've
You're
already.
talking 90 degrees every day.
Yeah, and people are dying because of the heat. And that's something that I've been seeing appearing in the news. You know, people who are in nursing homes and things like that have died. This is
very serious.
A serious problem for a lot of people. So, move on, or
yeah, I guess because
Okay.
I mean, what hasn't been said yet about this? You know, it's going to take a long time.
It's going to take a long
And
time.
as I said earlier in the show, we really don't know. We haven't seen what has really happened down there.
As I said, I've been looking to find out what had happened in Tampa, and I still haven't seen it.
You know, I was worried about my sister. She was in Jacksonville.
Okay.
And it turned out Jacksonville got a lot of rain.
I'll bet it did.
But fortunately for her, she saw it coming. They moved inland.
Yeah.
So she holed up in a hotel and she didn't even lose power.
Tori Wiegers, who's my landlady,
Yeah.
has an aunt who is a harbor master. And
Oh, yeah?
I forget which, but it's on the East Coast. But she went out to the harbor, you know, walking on the docks.
Yeah.
And she was walking on a dock, and she was almost waist deep in water.
Wow.
So, you know, the boats were towering above her. Okay, our next item is from Huffington Post.
The world's future energy system, cleaner, more efficient, with less demand.
Yes, and I have a different title for that, but that's okay. It's, my title is Good News, Energy Demand Will Peak for the First Time in Human History.
I know that. I knew you were going to say that.
Global energy demand will plateau from 2030. Oil demand will flatten from 2020. That's pretty close. And then decline significantly. The shift to renewable energy will be quicker and more massive than most people realize, according to findings from DNVGL's Energy Transition Outlook.
What's DNVGL?
I don't know.
Okay.
Usually we know these things, but it was something that I didn't recognize. Although the way this was written, it looked like it was and I may actually have looked it up, and I just don't remember what it was.
A quick takeaway here is solar PV will provide about a third of the world's electricity by 2050.
There have been people who have been predicting that it would be as much as half.
I wouldn't bet against it.
And the interesting thing
Rooftop
about that,
solar.
well, not just rooftop,
Yeah,
but huge. One of the things that you have to realize is that by 2050, we're going to have to cut our use of fossil fuels, not only for electricity, but also for transportation. And
that's coming along.
Yeah, transportation and for heating.
Yeah.
And for industry.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a 90% decline, with some people saying it may be closer to 100%. And that transition means that the amount of electricity that we're producing will wind up being maybe 3 times as much as we're producing today, even given that we're going to have a lot of efficiency. So when, for example, the U.S. DOE says that we can get in Vermont something like 55% of our electricity from rooftop solar power, what that really means is that we can get about 15% because we've got to multiply the amount of power that we're using by about 3 or more. So we'll see how that goes. So there we have more on that one, or should we move on?
No, I think I covered what I was going to say.
Our next item is from PD Magazine International.
UK auction sees renewables set record low auction price.
This has been in the news constantly ever since it happened.
Yeah,
they just keep going on and on and on. Offshore wind, it is. Offshore wind is now cheaper than nuclear or gas in the UK. The second contracts for different subsidy auctions that saw 2 developers win the rights to build offshore wind farms for just £57.50 per megawatt hour, which is $75.83 per megawatt hour. This compares to a rate of £92.50 per megawatt hour agreed for the nuclear power station at Hinkley Point. Now, offshore wind is significantly more expensive than onshore wind.
Yep.
But it is significantly less expensive than nuclear or gas in the UK.
Well, gas is not cheap in the UK.
No, it's not. They're planning on fracking the UK countryside.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, it's already happening, unfortunately, but there's a lot of opposition, and the opposition is very often successful.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that happens. But what's happening now is that offshore wind is turning out to be cheap, one of the cheapest. It's becoming one of the cheapest power sources we've got. The cheapest right now being wind power, and the second cheapest is a tie between solar and natural gas, although
that's here.
Yep, here. Although the price of power from solar is still dropping, and the price of net power from natural gas is not.
Correct.
Tuesday, September 12th.
Okay, we've got another picture here.
We have a picture here. There it is.
Well, if I was about 6, I'd love that tree.
You know, I used to work at a farm where a tree had fallen over many, many years earlier. And it had, in falling over, broken a limb and driven the stump of the limb into the ground.
So it became a new stump.
And new trees sprung up both from the roots and from that trunk. And the tree spanned a stream.
Oh, no kidding.
So it was literally a natural bridge across the stream.
Yeah.
And that thing reminds me of that. I would have loved to have been a kid climbing on that. Oh well.
I'd have loved that tree. Boy.
Yeah, anyway, this is from CNN.
Effects of climate change are creating a slow motion disaster movie. Yeah. And by the way, if you want to look that one up, there's about 50 pictures on that thing.
Yes.
It's a really nice website.
It is. The ongoing natural disasters ravaging the western and Gulf coasts of the U.S. should serve as a dire warning about climate change, according to Washington Governor Jay Inslee. He said the damage of hurricanes and wildfires show that, quote, we are seeing in real time a slow motion disaster movie that we are now living through that is not hypothetical, end quote.
He had a lot to say about this. He really did.
Yep.
I made some notes here, but I'm not going to pull them out because if you really want to see, it's going to take you half an hour to read this website. It's a good website.
Yes, it is. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica.
Wind power saved USA tens or hundreds of billions of dollars from 2007 to 2015. And we sort of talked about this before.
This is really kind of stunning, although it's not unexpected. A Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory study published in Nature Energy finds that wind power in the United States is responsible for saving tens of billions to hundreds of billions of dollars in prevented health care costs and saved lives from 2007 to 2015. The savings come from reduced pollution that cause asthma attacks and other diseases. And you know, the first thing that I thought when I read that was, here we've got people in Vermont who want to restrict wind power. They're actually calling for setbacks of a mile.
Yeah.
Well, if they have those setbacks, what's, I think, going to happen in the not very distant future is that somebody is going to say either we're going to have to reduce the setbacks or we're going to have to take the land inside the setbacks by eminent domain, because
people will be building.
People are dying as a result of pollution.
Yeah.
The cost of pollution in Vermont that was calculated by the American Lung Association was $330 million a year just from transportation caused pollution. And that is $480 per person for 47% of our use of fossil fuels.
Cars and trucks.
Yeah. And
this is about power plants.
Yeah, and what this means is that pollution is probably costing us $1,000 a year in medical costs per person in Vermont. And we've got to do something about that. People are losing a lot of money. Their health is going bad, and they're losing their lives.
What they're saying here is that power plant emissions, including sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter, cause or aggravate respiratory and cardiovascular health.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
And we've been taught to ignore that.
Well, you know, we have the idea that the status quo is normal.
Bingo.
Yeah. And you know, and it also reminds me of these hilltop habitats that anti-wind people want to save. They don't know that the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources is saying, hey gang, you can't save them, because the deciduous trees at the lower altitudes are moving up the hillsides, and they're moving into, outcompeting the conifers that live on the ridgelines, and they're saying we need to put refugia on our highest mountains in order to maintain those types of habitats. But on the ridgelines, they're going to be lost. And they've been saying this for years, but you know, there's a movement out there which is essentially anti-science.
Yeah.
And, you know, anyway, I'm ranting. Should we move on?
I got a little rant here. This came from the article.
Okay.
Only those with a severely stunted concept of ethical behavior could argue that they should be allowed to continue poisoning people with the waste products created by their economic enterprise.
What was the term? Severely stunted?
A severely stunted concept of ethical behavior.
Severely stunted concept of ethical behavior. There you go. There are people here in this state, in Vermont, who have severely stunted concepts of ethical behavior.
And here's what he says about it. If we all emptied the contents of our septic systems onto their lawns, they would soon start singing a different tune.
I would not advocate that approach. That's just mean.
How much more evidence do we need that fossil fuel advocates, including the idiot in the Oval, are two-faced lying weasels who are content to poison most living things just so long as they can make a profit doing so?
This is Steve Hanley. He's really, he doesn't pull any punches.
That's the author.
The author of the article, yeah.
He didn't pull his punches there.
No, he did not. Although, you know, I recently put an article up at Clean Technica which basically says that there are a bunch of people in the United States who are preventing deployment of renewable power, and they belong in prison.
Well, yeah, really.
So,
well, we sort of referenced this one before, but we'll talk about it in more detail now.
Yeah.
It's about Hurricane Irma.
Yep.
Climate change deniers' chickens come home to roost.
This is from Independent Australia. They pay attention to these things.
It is that.
Yes. Recently, U.S. right-wing media personality Rush Limbaugh was still enthusiastically pushing the climate change denial barrow. 2 days later, he was evacuated from his Palm Beach residence along with his neighbors at Mar-a-Lago. He has not been heard from since. Well, got to tell you, I haven't heard from him since, but this was published a couple of days
ago.
So maybe somebody's heard from him since. I don't know. But, you know, I mean, how far do we have to go down this path before these people start admitting what's actually before their eyes?
This is what the article said. As the devastation of Hurricane Irma rips through Florida, will it convince deniers like shock jockey Rush Limbaugh, Governor Rick Scott, and the Koch brothers that there is no climate science conspiracy?
The Republicans are going to wind up being voted out of office by some livid taxpayers when people really get to understand thoroughly the extent of the damage that is being done now. They're going to have to say, hey folks, somebody lied to me. I believed it because of my experience with them in the past, but it turns out they lied to me. And let's do something else. It's going to happen.
From the article, it says Florida is America's #1 climate change denier state from the top on down. Governor Scott of Florida has presided over business as usual for the fossil fuel industry and has hindered all efforts at utilizing renewable energy.
Yeah. Okay. Wednesday, September 13th. Boy, I was almost really off there. And this is from investorideas.com.
Nice picture.
Isn't that a nice picture?
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful picture. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Pittsburgh. Go ahead, Tom. What's the title?
That is the Phipps Conservatory.
Sure is.
In Pittsburgh. And it says that the Phipps Conservatory achieves a 56% reduction in carbon emissions. But it's a beautiful room.
Isn't that beautiful?
Wow.
Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens in Pittsburgh has reduced its carbon dioxide emissions per square foot by 56%. This significantly exceeds the Paris Climate Agreement's goal of 26 to 28% by 2025. Phipps reduced its carbon footprint through the use of renewable energy and sustainable building designs. They had built some new buildings, and they were being very careful to make sure that their designs were sustainable.
The building's designed to be net positive energy.
Yep.
And net zero water.
There you go.
Bingo.
Wow. I mean, how much better could you do? Well, I can think of a few things they could do. They could make the inside of that building into a bird sanctuary or a butterfly sanctuary or something like that.
Butterflies would really be nice in there.
Wouldn't they be nice?
Yeah, wouldn't that be sweet? I've never been to the butterfly farm down in Mass.
I have. It's fun.
They say it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's very, very nice. When I was down in Washington with my daughter, we went to the Reagan Airport on a Sunday morning once. And this picture, for some reason, reminds me of that huge room that was, the waiting room at the Reagan Airport. And there was nobody there. I don't remember why she had to go, but there was nobody there. Nobody. We were the only people in the room except for the people who were working at Starbucks.
Okay.
So we went down to the Starbucks and we got some coffee. And as we sat down for the coffee, my daughter looked at it and she said, we should go on.
We're running near the end.
We have an item from Green Tech Media, and honestly, I think this is one of the most interesting and important ones of the week.
Department of Energy officially marks SunShot's $1 per watt goal for utility scale solar. Now this is the price of building it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's official. The solar industry has met its 2020 utility scale solar cost target set by the Energy Department's SunShot Initiative 3 years early. The DOE's National Renewable Energy Laboratory released a new study today being Tuesday, I guess, that shows the average price of utility scale solar is now under $1 a watt, and the price for the power it produces is below 6 cents per kilowatt hour. And that means
this is pretty good.
That means that solar power, electricity from solar panels on a utility scale, costs less than power from natural gas in many or possibly most circumstances.
And if it doesn't yet, it will.
Oh, well, there you have it.
This is higher than the record-breaking project bids we've seen in the U.S. and abroad in recent years. Not by much, but that's because the DOE calculations don't include subsidies.
Yeah, there's no, this is unsubsidized solar power. So the cost that they've got, 6 cents per kilowatt hour, includes the value of the subsidies as part of the cost. So this is not just what the utility is paying, it's what the taxpayer is paying added to it.
It's going to go down from here.
And
I mean, we've been watching solar
Yes.
costs dropping.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And battery storage is
Absolutely.
dropping.
Should we move on?
Yeah, this is the last item, isn't it?
Our last item is one of the most important and interesting ones of the week.
A local story. Vermont gas customers can soon buy into renewable methane. It's sort of like cow power.
Yeah, it is. Except you can buy the cow power for your home in the form of gas.
That's basically what it is. Exactly.
Vermont Gas Systems will begin offering renewable gas, natural gas, methane produced from landfills, cow manure, and other organic sources this heating season, regulators said. The company was required to develop a plan to do this as part of the approval for its recently completed 41-mile natural gas pipeline into Addison County.
Well, this is pretty popular. According to the article, studies have indicated that around 85% of the company's ratepayers would be willing to pay up to 10% more if the natural gas they bought came from renewable sources.
Yeah.
85%.
Well, I'm not surprised, to tell you the truth. There's a lot of people who favor this. And as a matter of fact, you know, this pipeline was going into Middlebury, as I recall. And where there were a lot of activists who were saying, we don't want the pipeline. And I can't blame them for that. I'm not disagreeing with them. One of the things that happened here was that the folks at Middlebury College actually supported the pipeline. Not all of them necessarily, but some of them certainly did.
Because?
Because they had methane generators that were a dozen or more miles away on farms. And what they were doing was getting the methane from the farms and trucking it to Middlebury College, which uses a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
And what they thought, and of course what is happening is they were correct, was that those farms could put methane into the pipeline, and then they could draw it out again at the college. So this is what's happening. And the fact of the matter is that if you set up a plant properly, you could do the same thing in places that don't have natural gas pipelines around. You don't need to lay the pipeline to get the benefit locally. You can have methane generated at a farm, and then you can move that through you can truck it, but you can move it through a small pipeline to neighboring facilities.
Okay.
You see, and so if the manure at the farm wound up being next to a restaurant, for example,
they can pipe right into
they
the
can
restaurant.
pipe it right into the, and of course you're not going to have the manure next to the restaurant, but if you have it close by, you could have a 100-yard or 200-yard pipeline that would pipe it so that the restaurant could be burning natural gas.
And cooking.
Exactly. And of course the other thing is heating is so efficient using some of the new electric technologies we've got, like heat pumps, that it makes sense just to generate power and send the power into the grid and then draw that out as electrical power elsewhere.
You mentioned heat pumps. I got to mention this. The Housing Authority just built a new building up on High School.
Yes.
Called Red Clover Commons.
Yes.
And I just recently found out how they're heating it.
Yes.
They're heating it with underground water.
There you go.
It's the underground water source heat pumps.
Yes.
We'll have to get somebody from the Housing Authority on the show to talk about it.
Yeah. It's time to say goodbye.
I guess we
our
are.
Our time has run out.
That time.
So stick around. We'll see you next time, I hope. Bye bye.
Adios.
But we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land so lovely earth can stay lovely still.